Welcome to Shooting the Space, the rocket photography podcast where you can get a front row seat to everything you want to know about capturing photos of launches and landings.
Falcon 9 photo.
Go for launch.
Vehicle supersonic.
Booster shutdown.
Stage separation confirmed.
Side boosters transonic. And stage 1 launch photos closed out.
T-minus 15 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey guys, Erik Kuna here with Shooting the Space podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, John Kraus. Hey, John.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, good. We're talking about Antares today, right?
Yes,
so,
we are.
We just got back last week from this mission. So this was up in Wallops Island, Virginia. It was a resupply mission for the International Space Station. And maybe you could kind of tell our viewers, like, what is a resupply mission to the International Space Station mean?
It's not your normal satellite launch. It's
Right.
launching a capsule full of science, food, supplies up to the International Space Station for the astronauts that are living up there. And
Yeah, I think it was interesting on this
pretty
mission.
Much, it's a resupply mission.
Yeah, on this mission, there's always like the random, or I don't want to call it random, but always the one that you're kind of like, that's interesting. Like you got the hops and the beer that went up to space one time.
Yeah.
This one had a oven
For
to
cookies.
bake cookies,
Yes.
right? Which sounds like, an oven to bake cookies. But if you think about it, it's actually really cool. Because if you think about living in space, and when you're living in space, like every one of their meals is something that's pretty much reconstituted.
Yes.
There's no fresh baked food, and having a
Sealed.
having a fresh baked cookie would probably be a mega treat.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
a psychological boost for sure
Yeah.
to have that change.
But it's cool because these kind of experiments, they're ongoing, they're happening up there because we're trying to figure out how are we going to do stuff like cook in space. How are you going to do that? Because if we're going to travel out into space, out into the cosmos, we're going to go to Mars, we're going to the moon, even further, we've got to kind of start establishing these things. And that's why the International Space Station is such a key to that, because it's really, if you think about it, in fact, your lifetime, you've known no different than people been living in space full time. Like
About a year and a half short, I think.
year and a
But
half
yeah,
short?
pretty much
Yeah.
since I was able to speak.
Yeah, so I was able
There's
to
been humans
kind of
in space.
remember there's been humans in space living full time.
Yes.
Now back in my day, we didn't have that. So I mean, it's just cool to think that we've had this space colony circling the Earth,
Yeah.
and doing these experiments that are going to let us push further. And two, all the experiments that people don't consider have helped us on Earth, especially in the medical community and stuff like that. But anyways, that's a little bit about the mission. Now we want to get into covering the mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why did we cover this mission? I know for me it was an assignment that I was put on to cover this mission because, again, it's an International Space Station resupply. It's something that's important to our space program, and we want to capture this. So we're like, okay, we're going to cover this. Go like you, in the same where you want to cover this, we both live in Florida. This is in
Yes.
Virginia. So
No.
we got to go from Florida to
Yes.
Virginia.
And I think the fact that there was a quote unquote launch drought on the Space Coast kind of gave us a little bit of a kick
that's a push.
to
Definitely.
drive up there for this mission. So we drove,
Yeah, we did.
and
We did. Yeah.
it's a long drive.
We actually
What?
drove in a Tesla.
Yes.
Which was nice, having
Which-
the autopilot and having all that stuff.
Definitely added to the excitement.
So that was a plus that we were able to drive in a Tesla. We were able to use autopilot, able to stop and just supercharge along the way. Which these are. This was actually our first stop, and these were new. Like they're called the urban superchargers or the mobile or temporary superchargers. But in addition, which I hadn't seen those before, which is kind of cool. And what I thought was funny is then John got his first experience with figuring out how to plug the car in. And then we got the little, film it. Yeah,
I was trying to film it on my phone
at the same time, and he couldn't get it to
plug
work.
It in, with my non-dominant hand. I just couldn't find it.
Yeah. So, so we got to, just kind of drive up and do that along the way. And really, honestly, why choose to drive all the way from Florida to go up there and not fly? So why didn't you fly?
So I think driving, you might think takes a lot longer than it does, but we talked about this because we did have a long time of driving. You don't save that much time by flying. And why would you say that, Erik?
Yeah, I mean, really at the end of the day, when you think about with flying, we have to factor in travel time when we get there as well as travel time to the airport. So right there, we're at about 8 hours, right? So when we looked
when flying,
at it,
you mean?
Yeah, when flying. So we've got 8 hours, and then we're locked into we have to fly when there's flights to those airports. So we're restricted to when we can fly. If we drive, we leave when we want. We pick up our cameras. We leave when we want.
Yeah.
Which is another thing on the backside. It's actually more on the backside of why I drove. Not on the front, because getting there would have been a lot easier flying. The only thing that really helps driving, though, on the front side is we were able to travel with as much gear as we wanted.
Yes, that's important.
I will say this, the Model 3, tons of space. I mean, there's so much space. We didn't even use all the space, and we each had, 7 cameras?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was able to pack a little more, let's just say with less consideration. I need to bring this, sure, I'll bring it. Versus flying, you really have to think about how much you want to fit into 1, 2, or 3 bags.
Exactly.
So we could kind of fit what we wanted on this trip.
So yeah, we load everything up, we get everything going, we go to the superchargers, we get up there, and now, so we left before sunrise.
5:30.
We got there way after sunset, so we roll in about midnight.
Just about midnight.
We actually were racing. So Trevor Malman, one of our rocket friends that we shoot with all the time, he was driving from Indiana. We were driving from Florida, and we actually met each other at the supercharger north of...
Within about 5 minutes.
Yeah, within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of funny how we all met up there.
With flying, we would have had a couple-hour drive from the airport either way. So
3 hours.
When you factor in, sure, you add a little time driving, you ultimately have a lot more flexibility. You don't have to rent a car, which is just another added cost when you're flying. And you just have a lot more flexibility in general.
Yeah. And actually, I know Trevor, for example, he has a Model 3, and he's saving money with doing that because flying does become a big expense, and then you have to rent a car, which becomes another big expense, and then you have to buy gas, which becomes another big expense, where, I mean, he's just basically traveling in the Model 3 and actually using the Model 3 as a camper, basically. So we didn't go that radical. But
so flights, even Southwest, which you can rebook rather easily and at low cost.
Southwest,
if any cost.
That is the unofficial airline of
launch photography.
Launch photographers.
Yeah.
Southwest.
With flying, you often have to book in a scrub day, so to speak.
Yep.
But with driving, if it scrubs 2 times and say we opt to stay, we're not shuffling flights. We just get in the car and leave when we want.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did at the end. I mean, we get to the end. I mean, we picked up our cameras, we loaded them on the pad, we turned out of at a Wallops, and we were on the road back home.
All our gear was still like
you
set up.
were editing, I was driving, then we switched. You drove, I edited, and then we uploaded everything. So there you go. So one of the other things with traveling on these trips that I think a lot of people don't realize is we have to prep for little sleep. Because when we get up to these locations, so for example, one of the things that we did when we got up to this location is, even though we land in town, we get everything done, and we're in the hotel by 12:30.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted to go scout a location in the morning, and we knew we had to be there at about 6. So we showed up, early morning that morning.
Yep.
At 6.
And this is one day ahead of launch.
One day ahead of launch.
So we could scout.
And this was the location that we wanted to shoot from. We had already studied with photo pills and looking at the sun and where it would be. We did not want to be at the press site, because the one thing about the press site was it was backlit. It basically was purely backlit. Where this site had two things going for it. It had the sun was a little off of the pad, and then it also had the possibility of the sunrise being very close, basically to the launch pads. So that's what was happening here and there's Trevor, and there's John, and there's myself, and we're shooting, and you can see there's the launch pad down there. There's the sun. So you've got this frame in here of the launch pad and the sun. And this is, again, the day before. We're finding our spots, trying to find where we're going to be set up the next day. And why would we do that? Because we know that this spot is the closest spot that the public can watch it from.
Yes, and I think it's worth noting heavily, this is a publicly accessible location.
Absolutely.
This isn't press exclusive. And we elaborated on this a little bit in our previous episode, but we willingly chose to go to this public location. We could have gone to the press site, but we deliberately made this choice and scouted ahead of time and stuck with our plan.
Because we knew that it had those things. We had the sunrise shoots that we were going to get, which were going to be very unique in that the rocket would be vertical on launch day. The sun would be passing through. Now, as you can see here in these photos, the sun actually was blocked by a lot of a cloud layer there. And actually, if you go to my finals, that was the rocket down the day before.
Yeah, so our scouting day, the rocket, if you can't see these photos, the rocket was horizontal.
Yeah, so the rocket was horizontal, that's down, and basically we're looking for these frames for the next day, figuring out what we're going to do the next day. So, and then just to kind of, drive that point home, the next day, so you can see when we're there, we're shooting, nobody, I think a couple
3 other
people,
photographers maybe
showed up, and then at sunrise the next day, the whole bridge is full.
Yes.
Everybody's on the bridge. The whole thing is just, and by the time we got to launch, this bridge is full.
Yep.
This area is full.
Yep.
Everything's full. Parking lot's full. And then you can actually see there's our car, which is in the first spot because we showed up before all these people came.
Yeah.
So
we got there at 4:40.
4:40, and
3 hours before sunrise.
And all we did, right? So John and I, we took our tripods out. We went to the spot that we found the day before. He put his camera where he wanted his tripod. I put it where I wanted my tripod. We hung a light on it so people wouldn't trip over it and find it. And then we went right back in the car because it was freezing.
Yep. We turned the heat on and then put on Netflix on the screen.
Yep. That's all we did. And then just wait. And then we were waiting. And then really what ends up happening at that point was, like you can see here, that's the sunrise where we got that sunrise with the rocket, vertical, shots like that where it wasn't, and then we still had the clouds, which the clouds ended up being pretty cool.
They did add some texture.
It did add some texture. And actually you can see right here, this is actually right there's Rocket Lab's pad right there in the middle there. So that's where they'll be shooting out of. But basically,
Can
that's
I
where we
can
were.
I add one thing?
Yeah.
I think the clouds, and again, a lot of you guys will be listening audio only, so I don't want to focus too much on the photos, but the clouds kind of added texture, and because the sun wasn't perfectly behind the pad, I think the clouds added a nice sense of, again, I talk about this a lot, visual weight.
Yep.
The clouds connected the sun and the launch pad. And,
Absolutely.
I think they were a good touch.
Yeah, I think because the sun was not intersecting exactly with the pad, which we knew it wouldn't perfectly intersect, we would have had to be over on private property to make it perfectly intersect. It was better, I think, to have the clouds.
Yeah,
because it added depth and dimension to the scene. If it was just bald, it would have just been like a sun with the pad.
Yeah.
Still would have been cool. Still would have been able to work with it, but it worked out. So now going back, because we kind of jumped there to the day of launch, but going back to remote camera setup. So we chose to be off-site for the distance shots, but we also set up pad cameras. So, that's where we go out to the pads, and like here, where there's us in the parking lot here, where we've got the car out. This is before launch, and actually, I think I have John was dancing. Here's a little video where he's just
pretty
dancing.
Bad.
Yeah.
If you're listening to the audio only, keep it that way.
Yeah, keep it that way. So we're out the parking lot.
Visitor center parking lot.
Yes. Yeah. And so this is where we're going to load up. Well, we get all of our cameras already set up, all configured, all ready to go. Because again, I think we both agree, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, we have everything set up so that way we can focus on what is the most important thing, and that is the composition.
Yes.
Right?
You don't want to waste your valuable time at the launch pad setting up things that you could set up before you get on the bus. I try to set up as much as I can before we get on the bus. So like you said, set the camera down. If you absolutely need to, stake it down, which I didn't for this launch. But get right to focusing on that composition, because we don't know how much time we have sometimes. So that time is valuable at the launch pad.
Yep.
We
110%.
don't have autonomy out there. We're under escort by media officials, and when they say it's time to go, it's time to go. So
I will say, speaking of escorts, media officials,
yes,
we had an awesome escort this time. Yes. So very cool.
Shout out to Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick.
From Patrick.
Yep, and he was awesome. Really great with working with us. Didn't feel rushed. Didn't feel like we had the time that we needed, and then also allowed us to go to the spots that we knew we could go to. Sometimes that's the other thing, is you'll get into, like, we'll even get approval beforehand to go certain places, but then when you get out there, it'll be like, no, you can't go there.
Yeah, sorry, there's construction. Yeah. You can't get there or whatever.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think with this launch, I only staked down one place, and it was on the hill that we set up on. Mm-hmm. So, which was, we had gone back from the pad and actually gone farther away from the pad in order to create a shot.
Yeah, we don't often have, like I was saying, autonomy to walk wherever we want, but in this instance, we were able to kind of roam freely, so to speak. And when we have that opportunity, it's not often that we willingly walk farther away from the launch pad, but there are scenarios where walking a little bit farther away can lead to a more creative image.
Yeah. So, and up at Antares, so we had two positions, basically. We had north of the pad and then south of the pad, right? So maybe explaining to people, like, the north of the pad locations, So you had a couple of shots, so maybe we could get over to your portfolio here and kind of shots of it. And we can
from
see,
the last launch?
Yes. So let's go here. This is your portfolio. So this is from the gallery. So this spot was north of the pad, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that was that spot that we were talking about, where we intentionally walked back a good amount of distance to get this shot, right?
Yeah. You can see, if you can't see the photo, rather, I'm utilizing trees as a compositional element to sort of frame the rocket and just kind of add a sense of depth and really showcase the local scenery at Wallops.
Right. And the other thing I love about this is there's a lot of construction happening up at Wallops right now. And there's also a lot of older buildings up at Wallops right now. And this kind of showcases the new pad that is over there and the landscape in a great light, you know?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
it
that's a
kind of
big
blocks out
thing.
a lot of that construction.
Yeah, and like this was so like mine there. So yeah, like I was doing more of, putting that seagrass kind of in the bottom of the frame, hiding those buildings, hiding a lot of the stuff that was going back there, just to showcase the rocket in with nature.
And I think this would be a good time to point out. I know we talked about last episode how we often are restricted to a
Mhm.
very small area for our cameras. In this case, we weren't, but it's worth noting the shot of mine you just showed and
Mhm.
that photo of yours, those cameras were what, maybe 10 feet from each other? And
If that,
they still
different
ended up
shots.
with pretty different results.
Oh yeah, probably 10 feet. Yeah, and like I said, I think you didn't stake and I did stake, but I think you
Hmm.
probably would have staked this camera if you had stakes. Would you
Yes,
say? The
I
rest
would
of them I
absolutely.
didn't stake, but this is just because we were on unlevel ground.
It was a
Um,
hill. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And actually, then if you look at one of our other launch photography friends, right? Um, Let me get to that shot. This is what we're talking about. So that's me. I'm taking the photo. John's walking, but then you can see up here, there's Brady.
Up on
So
top of the hill. He
Brady
went even
all went
higher up than we
all
did.
the way up on the top of the hill, where that's my camera there. John's is back here
Somewhere right there.
somewhere,
Yeah.
right there. So you see, we were just up high enough. I just got high enough to be at the top of that tree line because I didn't want to see the pad. Um, John framed up the trees, but then Brady, and I'd be able to bring up, or maybe we can have Brady on and he can talk about the shot, but his shot almost looks like a drone shot. Very
It
cool
does.
because
Yeah.
it's kind of like sitting up there hovering above the pad. Really
And
cool stuff.
looking at that hill and how far away that is from the pad, you wouldn't really think that would provide a much different view, but it does. And it
Oh,
conveyed in his
absolutely.
pictures for sure.
So, a couple other spots on the north side. This is one. This was on the north side, right? So
Hmm.
this is a shot that I think you alluded to this shot last week
I did.
in our
And I wanted
podcast,
to add
right?
to it on this episode.
Right. So this is the
So,
one that you were talking about last week, where you were talking about um, people go for this one shot, but
mhm,
they never go for this shot,
yeah.
right?
So that, if you're not looking at the photo, there's a sign at the launch pad that says moon ahead, and it has an arrow. And I believe that points to another old pad down the road that was used for some sort of moon related launch. I'm not 100% sure about that, but either way, 3 feet, maybe even less, to the left of that sign, there is another sign that says International Space Station on
On
ramp,
ramp, yeah,
something to that effect.
yeah.
And that's sort of the iconic shot from Wallops, where if you travel to Wallops, you'll probably want to go for that shot. And I've seen that shot before. I even went for it at the previous one, but my camera didn't fire. And I had an extra camera devoted to a generic wide shot ahead of time. And when I got to the pad, I just thought, I've never seen anyone shoot with just the moon sign. And it immediately stuck with me because I think it's a good representation of kind of the current state of our space program with,
That's
going
what I
back to
love
the
about it.
moon.
That's
Yeah,
what I love
it's a
about it.
symbolic photo.
Yep.
And I don't believe we have this photo readily available, but one of our colleagues took a photo of me at that location with all the cameras that had already been set up because there were two different remote camera setup times for this launch. And Erik and I both opted to do the later one. But there's maybe 5 or 6 plus cameras behind me, and my camera isn't pictured. It's on the other side of a concrete structure nearby. But it just kind of shows that sometimes the most obvious photo is right in front of you.
Yeah.
And you just gotta kind of switch something in your brain to think of something different.
And that's what's so cool. I know after I was setting up on the other side for a shot that I was doing, and then we came back and we met, and John showed me. He said, "Here, look at what I got." And that's the thing. Then I went, "Yeah, I totally see it. Genius," because it was one of those things where we've seen the other shot a million times, and this is a shot that. I mean, maybe somebody's done it. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, and I don't want to try to claim that no one has
Yeah.
ever done this before. I just want to say that
But it's
I've
that
never
whole thing
seen
of
it.
we've never seen it. So then I was like, yeah, that's really cool. You
And
know?
one other thing to note about this photo that we talked about last episode is we're at the point in our launch photography experience where we are setting up our cameras to get, for the most part, one shot. I framed that shot with enough dead space or empty space above the launch pad, knowing that the rocket was going to climb into the frame and that the rocket would line up with the arrow on the sign. And that's just something that you kind of develop over time.
Yep. Cool. And then let's see, over here.
You did some shots from the north spot.
So this is the north spot. So this was a north location. I loved this liquid oxygen tank here, and this leading line to kind of the pad, and did kind of a close-up shot here. And then I did this other wide shot, but really I did this wide shot, which is kind of boring, but I did it for this effect that I was going after, which is a long exposure like this, where it's not a long exposure like I put an ND filter. I took it into Photoshop and literally combined the layers with statistics to get the statistical maximum and statistical average values to kind of put it together in post, which I just really love because it creates this where the water tower is totally still and not moving, and then everything else that was moving becomes kind of blurred like a long exposure, but all the stuff that was still remains still. So,
and with that framing, I think a lot of photographers wouldn't consider that really a wide photo, but as we were saying, with not shooting super wide anymore, going in tight enough to just get the rocket, I think most people would kind of consider that a medium shot, but it's something that at this point in our photography
I call this a wide
adventure, we call it a wide.
That's a wide shot for me.
Yeah.
You know, because too, the other thing is with that shot, that's almost in proportions where I know I'm not going to get distortion.
Yeah.
So I wanted to not have distortion in the water tower or anything. You know, I wanted it to be non-distorted. I wanted it to be a good focal length there.
That's like in the 35 to 50 range, right?
I think it is 50. So
cool.
Right around there. So that's the north side, right? So then we go to the south side, and the south side is what opens up. We'll go flip back over to yours. Starts opening up these engine shots, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's not to say they can't be captured from the north side, but I think there definitely is more open space to acquire a clear engine shot.
Correct. And that's why on the south side people go for engines more, is because you have a cleaner line of sight. And especially, I mean, with this launch, again, with the Rocket Lab construction, we were even faced with more challenges because...
Yeah, we didn't know how extensive that construction would be going into this launch.
Right. Even though I did ask, I did try to ask because I knew it was going to be a problem. And I got we're not really going to answer your question response. But, just because you're just wondering, like you're doing all this planning and you're like, hey, it'd be nice to know if there's going to be a bunch of garbage cans and storage bins, which there was. And I'm sure you could see in certain people's photos. But when I see that stuff, I go, I cannot have this in the photo. This is not going to put the rocket in its best light. This is not going to tell a great story. You know, seeing a dumpster next to a rocket launching is just not what you want.
Yeah, it doesn't really paint NASA in a good light.
Yeah, or I
And
don't
that's
really
kind of
like.
our job.
Yeah, I don't want to put like that next to also like dilapidated buildings or something. I
Hmm.
don't want to do that, or weeds, overgrown weeds. Like I want something that's going to look good for the rocket, good for NASA, good for everybody. You
Now,
know.
that's not to say you can't utilize those elements. You can definitely create good photographs using those things, but part of our job as storytellers is to try to convey our subject in an appealing manner.
Yes, but then again, this is just my opinion on it. I mean,
Yeah,
people can have
yeah,
different
yeah,
opinions on it. Um, but yeah, so there's an engine shot from the south side.
yeah. Can I add one thing about that photo?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm struggling to say some of these things, knowing that a lot of you guys will be audio only. So
Hmm.
bear with me. One thing interesting about that shot is, and I guess not just this shot, the rocket was horizontal when we were setting up our
Mm,
cameras.
good point.
So at focal lengths that extreme, that shot was, I think, 400 millimeters. Before the launch, when I was setting up that camera, that viewfinder was pointing, or that viewfinder was showing an empty sky.
Yes,
I had to
it's
guess where the
freaky.
rocket was going to be raised into the frame, which is so scary.
Yeah, I mean, you can
But
go here. Like, it was.
I didn't know if I was pointing at the right thing.
This is how it looked, right? So where
Yeah,
this is about where John's probably set up, very close to it.
just about. Yeah,
This is going to swing up and be in this place, and he's
yeah,
framing up in this area of just dead
yeah.
sky,
There's a
and you got to
small,
just like wing it.
there's a small like metal bar or tower right there. My frame was just above that,
Yep.
but I didn't have any reference. So it's sometimes it is guesswork. You can plan and as much as you want, but you're going to get to the pad, and the rocket's not going to be vertical, and you're just going to have to wing it.
Well, and you have to go back to shots that you've done previous and know like
Yes, yes,
where these where this is going to intersect over here, where this is going to intersect over here. And then the other thing about this rocket is it does that push. So it
yes.
actually does a push, as you could see in that long exposure that I was showing.
It
Um,
drifts.
it drifts. It's a Bumgarner bum. I forget it. It's called.
I forget too,
It's
but
something like that maneuver, and
it does a
basically
dance.
what it does is it does this where it starts off there vertical, and then you can see it's just pushing its way horizontally through the frame,
Yeah.
and that's what happens in real. So if you're framing up an engine shot and you frame it up over here because you think, oh, it's going to go straight up, it's actually going to be, if you're close enough, out of your frame.
And that's something you just have to know and study, and
Yep.
either study it enough ahead of time, or both of us had already been to launches from this facility before, so it's just something you learn with experience.
Yep. So we got that shot. This is
I think,
another one. This is south side, right?
Yeah, the south side was kind of lit more directly by the sun
Mm-hmm.
than the north side, which is something we considered while planning these shots.
Yep. And then over here, that's mine on the south side. This is one where I went a little different and went way over to the left. I really wanted this. I wanted that kind of, there's like a V that happens here, like it's like a clean V, and that's what I was going for. I knew
Yeah,
there'd be the ice falling on this side. I know just from this rocket and what it does, like that's what it's going to be. I'm going to have this over here. This was the framing I was going after.
yeah. Just in case you're not watching, Eric's showing a shot where the
Yep.
strong back tower, I don't know if that's the exact term, but the
Yep.
launch tower, so to speak, is in the frame,
Yes.
which was a conscious decision.
Right. I wanted that to lead you down to where the flames would intersect, with the ground, but then kind of simplifying it. Another shot from the south. This is another shot. This is another one. So this is an interesting one. This is one where I've started to do something different, right? Or at least for me, something different. And that is starting to blend an engine shot with what I'm considering a wider shot. So this is not ultra wide. If you're not watching this, on a screen, it's not an ultra wide shot, but it's kind of that medium shot that John was
Yeah.
talking about. But it's exposed for the engine flame detail. So it's actually underexposed a lot to get that flame detail. And what it creates is during a daytime launch, you get these pops of color and highlights where the sun's hitting intensely. But then you also get these pops of color where the rocket's hitting intensely. So it becomes very dramatically lit. That's how I'll put it. Like you can see actually here where the sun was not hitting on the lightning rods, it is black. Where it was,
it really exaggerates contrast.
Yeah, exactly. It really exaggerates that contrast, but then it gives you all that detail in here, and you can see even over here on the strong back. I mean, there's just so much detail in there because, and I believe that was shot at it's shot at 1/8,000th of a second.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's super quick, It's definitely underexposed, but it's underexposed intentionally because that's the shot I was going after. And I actually tried this on CRS-18, tried it again here, just with a little variation, and I'm starting to like it. I'm starting to really like it for daytime launches where it's giving me the drama I can sometimes get out of a nighttime launch during the day. Yeah. Where it's just got that very contrasty look, but not so over the top contrasty.
Yeah. I've played around with it a bit, and I'm starting to like it more and more, especially as we push the limits of these cameras. We know it's possible, and we know how to apply that to what we want to capture.
Yep. So yeah, those are the two spots that we had to set up, north and south. We went a little further back. So the next day, we woke up and got those shots like the sun rising, but then at a distance you start getting that this is from that spot
same location
that we were talking about, where you're getting that distance shot from the bridge in the morning, or from the dock I should say, in the morning. I think there's one of yours.
You're fighting that morning haze.
Yep, you're definitely fighting that morning haze, but it can be really cool. Or you can you can underexpose with the flame, that kind of stuff. And then here you can even capture a bird in flight.
Yeah, I got lucky and
going off.
Yeah, a bird flew through my frame.
Yep. And what's interesting about that bird, so this is an interesting thing about the distance shots that a lot of people have. So you can see that bird is super soft, right?
Yeah. It's a lot closer.
There's a reason, is because you're focused way back in this rocket, which is 3 miles away.
Yeah.
This bird is not that far away.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that you do have to realize when you're doing those distance shots. Same thing here, where this foreground is closer, so it's soft. Here, this is kind of medium, I guess I call it, on there, where I just framed. There's actually a pillar right here and a pillar right here, and I intentionally went right through them, for that framing. But if you have something in your foreground and you're very close like that, it can actually become very distracting if it's so out of focus, if you put it too close to your foreground. That's why I wouldn't want to, I didn't want anybody on the dock or weeds that were on the dock in the foreground, because then they just come up to be a blurred old mess.
Yeah, and that was a lesson I learned at the previous launch I shot from Wallops. At the same location, I tried to utilize some foreground elements, but we had this discussion. You don't really get the same kind of framing when if you're shooting something far away and you try to utilize close framing elements, it just doesn't really convey because of the depth of field requirements and the size proportions and whatnot, versus using framing elements that are a lot closer to your subject when you are also closer to your subject.
Right, and you could even
just a lesson I learned.
You can even be shooting at f11, and if that subject is 20 feet away from you, and you're shooting something that's then 3 miles away, 2 miles away, it will, even at f11, it's going to be just blurred.
A mess. Yeah.
Just a blur.
Yeah.
It's going to become distracting.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to kind of position stuff kind of in that middle ground if you want a foreground element in a distance shot, you've got to put it in that middle ground. It's got to be a good 100, 200 feet away from you. It can't be
Which
right
is
next to you.
tricky because I think a lot of people that are shooting their first launch, or maybe even a little bit more experienced photographers, they want to get as close as possible every time. But sometimes, especially here at the Cape, you may want to go 2 or 3 miles further away because there's a better opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about being as close as possible, which we alluded to in sometimes opting to shoot at offsite locations like we did here.
Mm-hmm.
This site didn't have a lot of opportunity in foreground elements, but it was different than the press site. And I think we both agree that it was better in terms of the foreground.
Definitely.
And it was less backlit, which
Yes.
is just something we're always considering.
Yeah.
Where do we want to be?
Yeah, and also there's a lot more freedom off-site compared to on-site because, again, on-site we do have a restriction of you have to set up within this space. You know, they don't let us just go out there and go, okay, go have fun.
Yeah.
This is the press site. Go
Yeah.
go for it. You know, it becomes very similar to that picture that I showed with here with the behind the scenes. The press site becomes not much different than this, where it is just a line of people, kind of like this, which is the line of cameras. You can see camera,
Yeah.
all the way down. That's what it becomes. So, just something to consider. So picking up remotes, you know, I think with this launch, one thing that was really cool about picking up remotes at this launch is we got to actually caravan out to the pad. That was really cool. And if people don't know what that means, like we actually could take our personal vehicles in a caravan being escorted to the pad and
in
then
contrast
pick up
to being bussed out.
Yeah, and that's usually how we're traveling out is we're being bussed out to the secure location with our gear. We're putting it out. Then we're being bussed out to pick up our gear. For this one, which sometimes we do, we got to caravan out. So we just popped open the trunk, loaded in the cameras,
in there, and then,
took out the memory cards and got in the car and drove back to Tampa.
Yeah. So. And again, part of the advantage of driving, or at least one of the advantages, is it's not like our flight was in a day and a half. We just got to leave.
Yes.
So there's a lot more flexibility. You know, we don't have to then go out of the way to go back to our hotel, which is maybe in some cases the opposite direction of the airport. We just left.
Yep. That's all we did. We just turned it out and left.
Yeah.
So, yep. Well, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I had a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What about this launch after remote camera pickup surprised you, if anything? Did you have a shot that maybe turned out a lot cooler than you thought it would?
Let me look. I mean, I definitely tell you this. Like, I was very happy with this launch. Like, I got a lot of what I consider they were good shots. They were really like solid.
I agree.
Good shots. I think again yours too. I mean, I don't know. I'm really in love with this kind of like medium thing. Like I thought maybe it was a fluke. Like
your CRS-18 photo.
Yeah, the CRS-18 photo was a fluke. That couldn't happen again. And now I've realized, oh wait, there's probably a formula here. There's probably something I could do, and I probably could even push it farther. Because that's honestly how this stuff happens. I could bring up a photo that it illustrates this point, and it'll be how I'll describe it. But this is a photo that I took of the Falcon Heavy launch, right? And this is in the middle of the night, STP-2, middle of the night, dark as dark can be. And this is the booster, or this is the second stage down here going up into the atmosphere. And these are the two boosters over here boosting back to come land on land. And this shot was possible because of an evolution from this shot, which was another mission where there's the booster coming back, there's a second stage going up, which then came from other shots. This shot, which similar thing, and there's even one before that, which I don't know if I've even knocked that out of the portfolio because I was like, it's not that great anymore. But
I think
that's
it's
the
impossible
point.
to describe how much you're pushing the envelope there with camera settings, and how dim that is. You don't see that with your eye, and that's not to say it's fake, but you do a better job at conveying that than the eye can, which is hard.
Well, and that's what really, when you get down to it, like that, really the point being of like, that's the shot too, I think that I was really happy with, because it's starting to use these techniques and building off to create shots that you didn't think were possible, but then you start thinking, and then you think it's a fluke, and then you think, it won't happen again, and then it happens again. And that's where it started getting to, I wouldn't have got the STP2 shot, which is like the all-time, that's like one of my favorite photos, because
it's incredible.
I wouldn't have got that because I didn't experiment with previous launches to figure out how far can I push this thing? How far can I push this thing? Can I really go that far? Is this really possible? And that's when you start getting into, and those are the shots that really excite me, is when I start doing something that I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't even know you could get an exposure for the engine and the whole pad at the same time. Like really good exposure, like where I'm like really happy with it, and I don't feel like it's full of junk and noise, and it's just pushing that envelope. And then that's where, you look at those shots and you go, wow, So how about you? Flipping it around, how about you?
I was satisfied with this launch. I think the ones you travel to, you have to lower your expectations a little bit because there's so many new elements. You're going to be fatigued from a long drive. You're visiting a launch site that you've only been to maybe once or never at all. When, for example, we've been to Pad 40 probably 30 times or whatever. So I had a few failures at this launch. I had one camera not fire, and I talked about that a bit in the last episode, but I don't know why it didn't fire. I'm not going to tell you guys yet what shot it was attempting, but it was attempting something I've never seen anyone do.
You know what was weird about that? And I know the shot, but it fired when you got there. When you tapped on it, it was firing
when I left.
That's the
and
one
it was
that frustrates you
when I got
so
there.
much.
Yeah,
that's the ones that just chap me. Like, when and I've had these happen too. And that's where I knew the shot you were going after we had talked about it, and I was like, I was waiting to see it. I was like, wow. I mean, and I was just thinking like, wow, that's just thinking outside the box. And the stupid thing didn't fire.
And what's interesting is, at least from what I've gathered, the nature of the shot and the way it was different did not cause the misfire. There is nothing about that shot so it's frustrating because you first might think, I tried something new and it failed because it was new. It didn't fire, and sometimes that happens.
Yep.
And then I had another shot that at some point I bumped the focus while setting it up. Maybe I just didn't pay close enough attention. And that moon ahead shot is actually slightly out of focus, and it's barely inside the threshold of me publishing it as a not failure. It's good enough for social media. If someone ordered a large enough print of it, I probably would shoot them an email and say, hey, just so you know, do another one, or be prepared to not look at this too close because it's slightly out of focus. And again, that's just the name of the game with this photography is sometimes you're in a rush to set up. You can't triple check everything. And the unfortunate coincidence is that's the shot we talked about earlier that was different and so plainly obvious. And I got the shot, but it's not perfect, which sometimes it lines up where the new shot that you go for just isn't as perfect as it could have been.
Yeah, but then again, I think it gives you that point to iterate, right? So then now you're thinking, and now you're going to go to a different environment where that muscle you exercised with that creativity to think outside the box is going to come in later to where you're going to see the same opportunity but at a different pad.
At a different pad, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. I mean, that's why I say, like, there's times when I see opportunities that came out of other failures or other successes, you know, to where you start seeing opportunities before, that you wouldn't have seen before because you're exercising that creativity.
And this one didn't feel obvious until I was in the moment. And even further than that, there's some that don't feel obvious until I say, yeah, screw it. Yeah, I'll try this shot. And then I see it on the back of the camera after it fired. And I think, wow, I'm really glad I went for that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't even know if it'll be cool until it happens. So.
Yeah. Well, very cool stuff. Well, I don't have anything else for this as far as, this launch out of Wallops NG-12. So
I think we covered it broadly enough. There are some things with post-processing that we could probably dedicate to another episode or another segment.
We could definitely talk about post-processing if people are interested. And that's also a thing with these, these are just casual conversations. We kind of give ourselves like a little bit of an outline to go by, but it's very casual conversations about this stuff. So if there's anything that you want us to talk about, just let us know. I think we're an open book. So
and we're always open to feedback on anything really.
Yeah. So unless it's a criticism of our image, right? I'm just kidding.
No, I'm open to criticism.
That. And that's what, we're definitely, that's one of the things with John and I, we go back and forth about, well, you need people in your life that are going to be honest with you about photography, especially if you're getting into this. And that's one of the things, like, really, like, maybe totally off topic, but kind of on topic, is if you're going to get into this, you got to get people in your life that will be honest with you.
Yes.
Your friends on the internet will never be honest with you. Everything you shoot is a picture of a rocket. It's awesome, right?
Yeah. But especially with social media.
Yes, with social media.
You're gonna get great comments on bad images.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from you are shooting something that the subject is awesome. It cannot, I guess there are people out there, but most people are gonna go, wow, that's really cool. So you're not going to get that honest feedback about, because we'll get into there's a kind of a big one, like a crooked horizon line that just like really is a killer to shots. And a lot of people don't, if you're just like in a vacuum, you don't see that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you got people in your life that'll be honest with you and say, John will text me and go, hey man, that shot's crooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing I appreciate about our dynamic and our conversations is that we're not afraid to tell each other, hey, we think you could improve here.
Yeah.
Or,
in a
any
constructive
feedback.
way. I mean, I mean, there's going to be people who could be a virus in your life of just all they got is negative things to say about stuff and no constructive criticism. But you got to find people in your life that will be, constructive with their feedback and constructive with their criticism.
And one thing I always try to keep in mind is there is no one on this planet that I can't learn something from. That doesn't mean I'll apply it, but I'm open ears all the time because even the most inexperienced photographers could view something in a different perspective that I can then apply to my own work. So I may not agree with what you have to say, but I may be able to apply it to something else. So that's why I always listen to feedback.
It's amazing. I've kind of, I guess biased or tainted or something, I watched tons of training on photography on totally different genres. Of course, the
it's
company,
almost like that's your job.
Yeah,
right?
that's the company I work for, and that's what we do. But it's really awesome. I've used techniques from children photography in rockets. I've used techniques from macro photography in rockets. I've used techniques for shooting portraits, shooting landscapes, all these things.
You've told me you've used Milky Way techniques inverted that you then apply to.
Well, I showed them to you.
Rockets.
We were driving home. I went, I used what I used to use for removing selectively targeting certain areas of the image for noise, but in the opposite, because we're usually got brightness with darkness. It's the opposite. So, but it works that way where it's like you just have to like be thinking more globally or more photographically, to not think that like there's one way to do this or there's one magic setting that we push or something. There's not.
I think we got to be careful before we dive into another episode while we're still here.
I know, right?
There's a lot of discussion.
Yeah, there's a lot. We could go a lot of places, but
this is just making me think how many episodes we have with how many topics we can get into and just devote entire episodes to.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm excited.
You could get deep into any one of those things we were just talking about. So
yeah,
very cool stuff. Well, hey guys, I think, again, we keep on going over on our time and what we say we're going to do. But hopefully everybody enjoys it. Give us your feedback.
Yeah.
Let us know. And we'll just
Thank
be
you for
continuing to
listening.
talk rockets and shooting the space, right?
Yeah.
Which is a play on words if you haven't figured it out. So.
Yeah. Hope
All
you guys
right.
like it.
All
Thanks
right,
for
guys.
listening.
Thanks.
See you guys
See ya.
soon.